The temperament of a 60-year-old man changed drastically due to a heart transplant operation. After the operation, he not only falls in love with the sports that he once sneered at, but also changes his years of dressing style. He is now full of energy every day, and looks decades younger. What's even more weird is that his wife seems to see someone else in him, associating with the source of the heart. She guesses that her bedmate might not be her husband anymore. What on earth happened to him? Has he really transformed to another guy? In this episode, we will lead you to explore the secret of this old man after his heart transplant. Let's start the story with the 60-year-old man, Mr. Zhang Xiangyong. Mr. Zhang, who lives in Hubei, was sent to hospital for treatment due to partial heart failure. His doctor told him that he needed to transplant a new heart to solve the problem. He had waited for a long time, but there was no matching heart. Just when he was in desperation, good news came from the hospital that they finally found a heart that was suitable for him. The heart belonged to a young man who suffered from a car accident. Mr. Zhang didn't hesitate and think twice. He immediately agreed to undergo his heart transplant. After the successful operation, Mr. Zhang regains his new life. It stands to reason that it should be something worth celebrating. But his wife, Zhou Jihue, gradually discovered something strange. She found that after her husband came back from the hospital, he behaved sort of weirdly. He makes great changing to his lifestyle and temperament. Mr. Zhang used to live a sloppy life. He didn't like to take a bath and wash his hair. He was dirty and unkempt when he went out. The most unbearable thing for his wife was his sweaty feet. As soon as he took off his shoes, the stinky smell filled the whole room. Before the surgery, when Mrs. Zhang asked him to wash his feet, he immediately frowned on and refused to listen to her. However, there is no need for Mrs. Zhang to remind him now. The first thing he does when he returns home every night is to wash his feet. Moreover, he also learns how to dress and groom. Every time he goes out, he spends a lot of time in grooming, either combing his hair or looking at himself in front of the mirror. He used to wear rustic clothes, but now he wears clothes suitable for young people. After being transplanted the new heart, Mr. Zhang doesn't look like a 60-year-old man at all, but like a boy in love. His change is also reflected in his temperament. Before the operation, Mr. Zhang preferred to be quiet. He often went to places where no one was around, to see the beautiful scenery for a whole day, or went fishing alone. It can be said that he lived completely in his own world. Mrs. Zhang asked him repeatedly to go out to exercise. He didn't accept her proposal, and said that she should not meddle in his business. But now Mr. Zhang doesn't like quietness. He often goes out to play basketball with others, which, as he said before, he didn't like at all. He also falls in love with boxing. When he saw a boxing match on TV, he would punch sometimes. He is now in a very good condition, better than before. But his wife can't understand him little by little, because he is more like a stranger, rather than the person she is familiar with. In fact, not only Mrs. Zhang notices his strangeness, his old friends also figure it out. Before the operation, when they asked Mr. Zhang out for a walk, he never went out with them. Gradually they stopped inviting him. However, recently, Mr. Zhang starts to invite them out. His neighbors all say that Mr. Zhang is totally different now. He turns into another person. What happened to him? What makes him change his years of lifestyle? Mrs. Zhang thought of one possibility, which makes her panic. Decades ago, when they first met, Mrs. Zhang chased after her husband, who was not satisfied with her, disliked her low level of education, and felt that she was not good enough for him. But Mrs. Zhang took care of him with thoughtful and considerate kindness. Finally Mr. Zhang was moved. They got married naturally. However, their life after marriage was not perfectly satisfactory. When Mrs. Zhang was pregnant, her husband spoke of divorce with her on the grounds that he was not happy and that marriage restricted his freedom. Mrs. Zhang was pissed off. At that time their child was about to be born in a few months. She couldn't have a baby born without a father. For this reason, she refused to divorce. Accordingly, Mr. Zhang picked a bone with her at home. He usually showed his ill temper and frowned at her. It often happened that Mrs. Zhang cooked for him with good intentions, while what she got in return was not caring words, but sarcastic remarks. Mr. Zhang even treated her as a black stranger. Looking back to the past, Mrs. Zhang thought that her husband would definitely take the opportunity to file a divorce. If Mr. Zhang brings it up again, she will let him live the life he desires. However, things haven't turned out exactly as she expected. After the operation, Mr. Zhang asked her if she was tired, and if she needed a rest while she was cleaning. And when Mrs. Zhang is cooking, he will go to help her. What makes her feel even more heartwarming is that Mr. Zhang will also massage her. After married, she has always been the massager for her husband. But her husband never did it for her. Since Mr. Zhang has no plans to divorce, his change may result from other issues. Because of his new character and living habits, Mrs. Zhang holds the idea in mind that maybe the man in front of her is not her husband. Mrs. Zhang remembered what the doctor said before. The heart that her husband got was from a young man who experienced a car accident, reflecting on her husband's unusual behaviors and the similar incidents that she had seen on TV. She felt that maybe the man she is sharing the bed with now is not her husband at all. The next day, Mrs. Zhang went to the doctor by herself. The doctor told her that a heart transplant will not affect a person's personality. Of course, having been transplanted a vibrant heart, Mr. Zhang could become more or less cleaner than before, which makes him very different to outsiders. In fact, it is possible that the change in the body and mentality of a person, and the joy of regaining a new life, make him completely different. So why does Mr. Zhang undergo such a dramatic change? While Mrs. Zhang was in doubt, Mr. Zhang confessed to her. Mr. Zhang is still her husband who he used to be, but he changes his temperament and attitude toward her. He used to be indifferent to her. When he was in hospital, Mrs. Zhang took care of him every day from dawn to midnight. She cooked for him when he was hungry, fed him water when he was thirsty. She didn't allow him to do anything that would make him tired. She didn't go home at night, just lay down on the bedside to look after him. Mr. Zhang saw all these and kept them in his mind. His wife's meticulous care made him realize how heartless he was. He made up his mind to be nice and kind to his wife. Since then, he has been full of energy. He tries to do exercise and change his dressing style. All changes he made is to liven up the family which was lifeless. He wants his wife to know that he has changed. So far all the mysteries have been uncovered. Of course, there are still many people who think that the heart transplant surgery has affected more or less Mr. Zhang, whose personality has totally changed. Alright, what do you think about the story of this 60-year-old man? Share with us your opinions in the comments section. If you like my video, please follow me, give me your likes and forward me. Your encouragement will be the motivation for me to produce more videos.